Now, the G20 Summit has concluded, a two-day mega show of diplomacy that proved India's role as a world leader and as a proponent of peace.
दिनों में आप सभी ने अनेक बातें यहाँ रखी हैं, सुझाव दिए हैं, बहुत सारे प्रस्ताव रखे हैं। हमारी ये जिम्मेदारी है कि जो सुझाव आए हैं उनको भी एक बार फिर देखा जाए कि उनकी प्रगति में गति कैसे लाई जा सकती है। मेरा प्रस्ताव है कि हम नवंबर के अंत में G20 का एक वर्चुअल सेशन और रखें।
Tem muito significado, porque
मैं G20 समिट के समापन की घोषणा करता हूं।
Now, India forged a consensus on the joint declaration at the New Delhi G20 Summit. This came as an early breakthrough in the closely watched summit, as Russia and the West remained deeply divided on the paragraphs on war in Ukraine. A joint declaration was thought to be improbable, if not impossible, until the surprise announcement on Saturday. Now, India achieved a feat no one else has been able to in the last 1 year. It denounced violence, flagged humanitarian suffering, slammed the use or the threat of nuclear weapons. It also strongly called on members to abide by the principles of the UN Charter. All of this without mentioning Russia at all. When asked about the shift by the EU and G7 countries, officials reportedly said the choice they faced was of agreeing to the text or having no text at all. The latter would have led to unfavorable comparisons with the recent BRICS summit in South Africa. In Johannesburg, remember, Russia and China had agreed to a joint statement that included the reference to national positions on Ukraine. The phrase national positions also found mention in the New Delhi G20 declaration. Reports say that Western negotiators chose the option of having a statement to keep G20 alive as a platform, also as an organization. The joint declaration has been welcomed by Western leaders from Joe Biden to Rishi Sunak. Everyone lauded India's role in reaching the tough consensus, especially when the bloc in itself has diverse takes on the Ukraine war. Russia has welcomed New Delhi's leaders' declaration, while Ukraine has slammed it, saying that it's nothing to be proud of. The Delhi Declaration is a significant shift from the Bali statement. In 2022, the Bali Declaration explicitly deplored the aggression by the Russian Federation against Ukraine. It even demanded Russia's complete and unconditional withdrawal from the territory of Ukraine.
With regard to the Russia, to the comparison with the Bali Declaration, I would only say Bali was Bali and New Delhi is New Delhi. I mean, Bali was a year ago. The context, the situation was different. Many things have happened since then. In fact, if you see in the geopolitical segment of the leaders' declaration, there are in totality 8 paragraphs, 7 of which actually focus on the Ukraine issue.
The Delhi statement instead did not mention Russia, as we said, and instead it called on all states to follow the principle of respecting each other's territorial integrity and sovereignty. Now, Modi's headline statement from 2022 also found its mention in the joint communique. A paragraph read, "Today's era must not be of war." The other big announcement of the summit came from the sidelines. India, Saudi Arabia and UAE, the United States and EU launched the high-stakes India-Middle East-Europe Economic Corridor. It is a pact for building a major railway and port project. The ambitious project aims to enhance trade and connectivity across continents. It will connect West Asia with India and Europe. The project will enable the flow of goods, fuel and data from India across West Asia to Europe. Now, United States President Joe Biden hailed the initiative as a real big deal during the G20 summit. Now, for more on this, we are being joined by Joachim Bitterli. He's a former German ambassador to NATO and former European diplomatic and security advisor to German Chancellor Helmut Kohl. Welcome to the broadcast, sir.
Pleasure to be with you.
Now, let's start off with the war. Now, we are witnessing like three things here. And stay with me, it's a little long, my question. A joint declaration has been adopted by all G20 members. And in the paragraphs that talk about the war in Ukraine, Russia has not been mentioned by name, let alone condemned for the war. Two, India did not extend a formal invitation to Ukraine. And three, Volodymyr Zelensky has said that the declaration is nothing to be proud of. I want to ask you this. How should this summit be seen from the war's point of view, given that it's an economic forum, but geopolitics clearly had a wave on this?
I can only, to some extent, repeat what the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz has told in his press conference, that India and India's Prime Minister Modi and all the Indian diplomats especially can be proud of the result of his summit. You do not have to mention always, let's say, the aggressor in this war. The aggressor is well known. We know it. And when I read the text of this communique, One Earth, One Family, One Future, I find all the necessary elements to condemn the Russian aggression in Ukraine. I find all the necessary elements. I find this text is, in my eyes, when I add to this the passage on the food area, it's a masterpiece of Indian diplomacy, in my view. And therefore, congratulations to the Indian presidency.
All right, Mr. Bitterli. Siddhant, our principal diplomatic correspondent, is also on this broadcast. Siddhant, if you could quickly come in and take us through what has happened so far. And also, we are hearing that the Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi is going to arrive at the venue.
Well, I was coming to your second question. The Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi is shortly going to come here at the International Media Center at Bharat Mandapam. I'd like to show you the shots, live shots of the security right now. You can see there are sniffer dogs who have been brought in. A lot of camera person now right now waiting, of course, for the Prime Minister to come. But security has come and is checking the entire place, making sure that everything is perfect in many senses. But essentially, it looks like the grand finale of the entire G20 summit. The summit is, of course, over now, but the Indian Prime Minister's visit here is seen as important gesture, symbolic in many senses of how he is, of course, perhaps going to engage with the media, but what message he is going to send by his presence here. There are a lot of pavilions here. It is expected that he might just go to one of these pavilions, especially the digital payments pavilion, to, of course, use the facility there. But all in all, if I can sum up the G20 summit, it was a mega diplomatic victory for India in many senses. Whether it is the joint statement, which many of us expected is not going to come, whether it is the connectivity project, which is seen as a counter to BRI, or whether it's the number of bilaterals and the meme fest it started, which we saw on Twitter.
All right, Mr. Bitterli, if I could come back to you, a shipping and rail transportation corridor has been announced connecting countries across the Middle East, South Asia and Europe. Are you seeing this in any way a counter to China's Belt and Road Initiative?
In fact, that's the case. And I think if you want to speak about losers of this G20 summit, the loser is China. First of all, the lack of a presence of President Xi Jinping, a place in New Delhi, probably because of internal reasons. But at the same time, what India, Saudi Arabia, the Europeans and the US have brought about with this idea of a real corridor of transmission, transporting, helping, assisting between India and Europe, I think is a huge idea, and gives real sense to what the Europeans have been launching last year, this idea, let's say, of going global and playing a role of, let's say, the Russians or the Chinese have been trying to play in Africa and elsewhere. And I think when you compare this to the Silk Road of the Chinese, I think this initiative is avoiding, let's say, the potential misinterpretations you can give to the Chinese initiative. And therefore, again, congratulations to this summit, which could perhaps deceive in certain parts. The text for me, for example, is too long. No one can read it at the end of the day. Texts have to be shorter. But at the end, this project is, for me, a real highlight. And this could underline the growing integration of India into the international markets, especially into the market, internal market of the European Union. And at the same time, an outreach of India at the same time towards the Middle East, not only Saudi Arabia, but because I see indirectly Israel is integrated in this project, and then to Europe.
All right, Mr. Vitali, thank you for getting us all those insights. It was a pleasure speaking to you.
As always, a pleasure with you. Thank you very much.